Senator Frentz.
Well, thank you very much, Mr. President, and thank you, members. I'd like to address the contents of the bill in front of us that relate to the energy and utilities provisions. But first, allow me to start by thanking our chair, Senator Senjem, and my fellow members of the committee. We had some good debates this year. I think that's part of what we're supposed to be doing. I share Senator Senjem's thanks also to Mr. Lee, Ms. Doyle-Fontaine, our researcher, Cassie Tomerdal, Ms. Kleinbohl, Mr. Newton, Mr. Mum, everybody. You know, it's a good committee. It gets good information. We don't always agree, but I think part of what we're trying to do is say we give the public a good debate they can look at, and I think we did that. Having said that, the bill does not do what we should be doing. Out of a $9 billion projected budget surplus, which equates to about $1,800 per Minnesotan, this bill allocates $1 per Minnesotan, give or take, out of the general fund, and significantly appropriates less in the RDA. I do like solar for schools. I do think the securitization provision is an appropriate one. I do like that. I think that makes sense to provide an option. I do like the funding provided for the energy transition. As most of us seem to agree, we're in an energy transition. But frankly, the bill and the funding and the spirit of what it represents is a lot less than it could be. An example would be weatherization for our low-income Minnesotans. This is such low-hanging fruit. We can provide funding for weatherization and pre-weatherization. That helps people for whom their energy bills are a much bigger part of their income than the middle class or the wealthiest Minnesotans. We could work on EV infrastructure. I was in this chamber last year pointing out that General Motors and Ford and now Chrysler say that very soon they will only be making electric vehicles. Doesn't it stand to reason that we lean into electric vehicle infrastructure? We want Minnesota to be a state that people say, hey, they're ready for the energy transition. Our environmental stewardship, we got to take care of this planet. More on that in a moment. Our climate-related urgency, this bill actually moves us slightly away from our carbon reduction goals. Our clean energy leadership, what is Minnesota? It's a leading Midwest state. It should be a leader in the nation. The Infrastructure Investment and Jobs Acts, just as one example. We need to set money up for the matching competitive grants that our cities and counties want. Later this year, we're going to have communities saying to us, hey, how do I apply for a matching grant for clean energy? And if we don't have the matching funds there, they're going to be at a competitive disadvantage. Members, do we want to have federal tax dollars, for which Minnesota pays more than it gets back from Washington, D.C., by the way, going to states like New Jersey and California and Washington because we were not prepared for the competitive grant process? I think that's a miss in this bill. We need to set up those matching funds, and we need to set up the expertise to help those entities prepare those grant applications. The small towns in my district do not have grant writing people on staff. They need the help that we can give, and we have the ability to do that. But members, of all the topics that this bill invokes, climate change has got to be the big one. First of all, let's remember, the impacts of climate change hurt those with the least among us, those with the least money, our communities of color, those who have the least to prepare, floods, droughts, wildfires. Who is this most likely to affect soonest? As my friend Senator Herr said recently, those who struggle. Those are the ones who pay the highest price for climate change, and those are who we should be looking to. The report this last decade on carbon emissions is that American carbon emissions were on the rise from 2010 to 2019. So let's ask ourselves, how big a serious problem is that? Well, in a 2021 poll of 1.2 million people in 50 countries, 64% of people said climate change was, quote, a global emergency. If the temperature of a human being were to go up in the same proportion as our planet is heating up this century, those of us humans at 98.6 degrees would be at about 103 degrees. Now imagine for a moment if all of us had 103 degree temperature. How healthy would we be? Well, they would send us home. Now imagine if the doctor comes in and says, your loved one's at 103 degree temperature and there is no chance of that temperature going down. That is a rough comparison of what we're doing to this planet. We got to set some goals. We have to look ahead. It's been suggested on this floor that there's science both ways. I would ask members, is that really true? Senator Pratt, Senator Senjum, and I and others were in Germany not that many years ago on a renewable energy tour in which a member of the Bundestag stood up at a state dinner and told us, "You Americans are the only one for whom climate change is a political issue." We then went to the city of Hamburg a day after the President of the United States withdrew the United States from the Paris Climate Accords. So here's my first point. 19 of those 20 countries thought those climate accords were a good idea. As many of you know, the recent UN study is supported by over 190 of the world's top scientists. So here's my question for us members on climate change. Are we sure that we're the ones who are correct when we say climate change isn't a serious matter? Are we sure all these other people are mistaken around the world when they tell us that climate change is an emergency? Are we sure we want to be wrong about that? Or should we prepare adequately? To do that, the state of Minnesota's got to have goals that we can be proud of, and with that, Mr. President, I offer the A37 amendment.
The Secretary will report the A37 amendment.
Senator Frentz moves to amend Senate File Number 4091 as follows. Page 8 after line 26, insert is the A37 amendment.
To the A37 amendment, Senator Frentz.
Well, thank you, Mr. President. Section 216B defines our renewable energy goals, and this bill moves our goals to 100% clean energy by 2040. It's bold, and it's exactly what we should do. It defines the eligible energies, and it provides in Section 8 an off-ramp. So members, before you jump out of your chairs saying, we can't get to 100% by 2040 because of blank, this bill, this amendment would allow the Public Utilities Commission to take an off-ramp if we're able to show that the costs or the environmental impacts are not sustainable. So all we're saying is we're going to set a target. What do you think the rest of the country would think to see Minnesota set this target? They would applaud us. And I would suggest to you members, a group of Americans that would applaud us the loudest are the youngest Americans who have the most to gain by us attacking this problem head on. In Section 12, there's a carbon-free standard. We are going to say that we're going to be carbon-free 100% by 2040. My good friends on the Energy Committee will probably say, hey, Senator Frentz, didn't you and Senator Newton vote okay on the advanced nuclear study, and isn't that in this bill? And the answer is yes, we sure as heck did. And while there may be some disagreement about it, I'd like that to be a signal to every member of this chamber that we should be open-minded about how we achieve our carbon-free goals, but there should be no mistake that that's our priority. In Section 13, for those of us that talk about the economy, jobs, 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 a requirement that the local impact on jobs is a PUC consideration, and that includes that it require that applications create high-quality local jobs, recognition of the rights to organize, justify the transition on our energy, and prevailing wage. Those are working men and women issues, and those are the kinds of things that if we put into this bill, I think you'll see a lot of smiles on a lot of Minnesota faces. With that, Mr. President, I ask the members to consider a yes vote. Yes, it's a big change to this bill, but it is the right one. Thank you, Mr. President. Thank you, members.